hero in the world who can do everything. And you have proved since then, I mean, this is a long time ago, 1982, that you really have.
Yes, I think I remember I told you, this is horrible.
Just keep it like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
The machine and the human being. You know?
No, you
That-
need to think of it as a beard, you know, Hatshepsut's beard,
Oh,
Pharaoh's beard.
I don't like beards, you know. Yeah. Well, that's our so-called postmodern slave era. We are slaves to this machine. Anyway, your question was about what?
About you being this hero, and I'm surprised that you don't know this is a very famous Swedish children's book, but this is you.
Because
this is
no,
yeah.
just a second. Why I don't like this? And when I don't like something, I forget it, you know. Because I don't believe in heroism. This idea is fake. There is nothing called people who are heroes. No. And this story is not good for children. Yes, I'm speaking truly, because when I was a child, and then I read similar books who elevated the children to become heroes, so I felt inferior. I felt inferior to this hero girl. And this is not good, because we should give stories to children that people are equal, that you should work hard, but there is nothing called heroism. And we need to propagate this idea all over the world, because we live in the so-called 2% genius people, or 1% genius writers, creators, and all that. And this is not true. Anyway, this is a long story. Okay.
You need to read it first, because this is a girl that has inspired a lot of feminists.
Yes,
in Sweden.
I know. It inspires.
Anyway,
but still I'm speaking my mind. I speak in my mind,
but
against the traditional literature of children anywhere in the world, yes.
But dear Dr. Nawal, your women in your stories, in your novels, they are also heroes. There is Zaina, there is Zakeya, there is Firdaus.
They are fighters, but
yes.
not heroes.
All right.
They are fighters.
Tell us about your fighters.
Yes.
When you were in prison in 1981, Sadat imprisoned you.
Yes.
And you met a woman who inspired you to write the novel Woman at 0 Point.
Yes.
And she, to me, she is a kind of hero. She was going to be executed when you met her. Tell us about her.
Yes. Well, I think she was a great woman. She was a... How can I put this?
Let me hold it.
Is it not tiring for
No,
you?
it's not.
Because I need to concentrate, and I cannot have a beard like that. So the woman whom I met in prison, and then I wrote her novel, Firdaus, Woman at Pound Zero. I think it was translated to Swedish and other languages. She was a great prostitute, a great woman. Her life led her to prostitution. She could have been in my place, speaking to you, Firdaus, if her life was different, if her parents were different. She could have been here instead of me. So it's not a matter of having extraordinary genius abilities. It is our conditions, our life, our social, economic life, our health. People are sick. There are very intelligent friends of mine who are sick. I am 88 years now, still surviving. This is a privilege because I have the means to be healthy. I have the means to be healthy. But there are millions of people in my country, in everywhere, who are poor, don't have food, and they cannot be healthy. So they cannot live long, like me, 88 years. But there are some abilities, of course, some genetic abilities we inherit from our grandmother. A small portion, but the big portion is the struggle. The struggle every day to survive against all the odds. Because wherever we go, especially women from the poor classes, they have to struggle very hard to be educated and to re-educate themselves, because the educational system does not help to make you what we call hero. No, it makes you mediocre like everybody. But you have to re-educate yourself to be yourself. That's what I call heroism. Heroism to me is that you can struggle all the odds to be yourself at the end of your life, not to change yourself.
And you have done so. You have spent a life struggling to be yourself. You have educated yourself, but you also had parents who let you educate yourself. In your autobiography, which is not yet published in Swedish, you write a lot about your mother,
Yes.
Zainab. And she was a teenager when you were born. How do you explain that she inspired you to become a medical doctor?
Well, because it was my grandmother and my mother. My grandmother, the mother of my father, who was a peasant, poor woman, she was great. She was a hero. She was illiterate, poor, digging the ground to eat, fighting the mayor, fighting the king, and fighting the British. You know, that's women. That's my grandmother. My mother was from upper middle class, and her father was military. So he married her off to my father when she was 15 or 16. She was a girl, a young girl, when she became my mother. But still, she told me, Nawal, be careful. Marriage is a grave. My mother told me. Marriage is a grave. And I was fighting because they wanted to marry me off when I was 10 years of age, like her. But she told me, struggle. But she told me this secretly, because she was helping the family to marry me off when I was 10 years. So you see the paradox. But she really helped me a great deal to continue my education and to enter the medical college, my mother. And my father, too. My father has a role, but minor.
And yet it was your mother's smiling face that you saw above you after you had been genitally mutilated when you were 6 years old. They pulled you into a bathroom and cut you when you were 6, and your mother was standing there above you. Did you ever confront her with this? Were you...
First of all of us in every country, men and women, we are all genitally mutilated. All. Because some people think I am the only one who had this operation in childhood. Men, all men are genitally mutilated by male circumcision. And I am a doctor, and I know the harm of male genital mutilation. And women are mutilated in different ways, not just cutting the clitoris. Cutting the mind. Our mind is cut by education, by religious education, by brainwashing. But we don't notice the brain mutilation. Brain mutilation is the most dangerous. So we have to look to the problem of genital mutilation, male or female, as a whole, not only to the clitoris, from the mind up, till the heart, till the emotions. Our emotions are cut. We don't live ourselves. That's why I say heroism is to keep yourself intact, to be yourself, and to fight against all powers that try not to make you yourself. So your question about genital mutilation. Well, because when you come in the public like that, and you say, Nawal, you were genitally mutilated, some people feel offended. Offended when I come to you and tell you, you are genitally mutilated. What do you feel? You feel offended. You do not, all men are circumcised. I don't come to a man who was circumcised and tell him, you come. You were genitally mutilated when you were a child. He would be offended because he will think he is the only one in the world, though all people in the world are mutilated.
But you are one of the few who actually wrote about it, who wrote about your experience. But you said that you forgot about it for many years. You didn't have memories of this incident. Childhood amnesia. We call it in medical terms. Childhood amnesia. All children forget pain to defend themselves, to live. If children remember their pain, their mutilation, then they cannot live. But to survive, they have to forget. So we call it childhood amnesia. Amnesia. I hope my English is clear. Yes. Amnesia, it means to forget. So I forgot all about it. It was done when I was 6. And I forgot all about it. And then when I went to the medical college and started to see boys and girls being mutilated in front of me with their pain and cries, I started to remember. It clicked, something happened, so I started to remember, and then I started to write. And that's why many people, when you ask them, did you have any mutilation, genital mutilation, men and girls and boys, men and women, they say no. And people think they lie because they are ashamed. They don't lie. They have forgotten about it. But many women in Egypt do witness about having been cut when they were children.
After being exposed. When we exposed the harm of genital mutilation, women started to remember, but many forgot.
Yeah. And it still happens to a very large extent. And I remember when the Muslim Brotherhood was in power in Egypt for 1 year, several members of parliament from the Brotherhood were advocating unbanning genital mutilation of girls. And they also had it on their medical buses that went out to the villages. Yes. There was a sign with, a price list for a blood test, for etc. And there was also FGM, female genital mutilation, on that price list. How do you explain that? I mean, you have talked about this for decades, and so have others. Yeah. Why is it still so common?
Politics. Genital mutilation is a political, economic matter. It's not just a sexual matter. It's politics, it's religion, it's economy, it is everything. So that's why I like to put genital mutilation in its political context. It is not separate from politics. We live in a jungle. It's not about Egypt or Muslim brothers or Jewish brothers or Christian brothers or Hindu brothers. All religions oppress men and women. All religions, not only Islam. All religions oppress men and women. All governments exploit their people, including the US, including Europe, including Sweden. We are living in a jungle. There is no equality. Whatever you go, look at Trump, what he's doing now. Millions of women are fighting against Trump. So, what happened in Egypt that the Muslim brothers, after we started the revolution in 2011 in Tahrir Square, millions of people, Egyptians, men and women and children, we were in the streets. And Mubarak was dismissed. What happened? Hillary Clinton came to Cairo, to Tahrir Square. I saw her with my own eyes in Tahrir Square, giving money to young people to elect the Muslim brothers. Why? That's a big question. Why US colonizers was interested after our revolution to bring the Muslim brothers to power in Egypt? That's politics. And my conclusion is, politics is not separated from religion. Religion is politics, and politics is religion. And if you eradicate religion, you eradicate inequality and racism and colonialism, and people will be free. But they use God. All governments, they use God to justify injustices. Injustices in relation to women or men or the blacks or poor. That's why religion is coming up. Why in the 21st century we still have revival of religions everywhere? Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. I was in India, and Buddhism is up. Why? A big question. Why revival of religions all over the world? Why universal religious fundamentalist movements in the 21st century? That's to keep the people down by religion, by God, to use the power of God to keep you down, to be afraid to criticize, because you will be killed. My name was on the death list for years, up till now, because I'm speaking like that. But we have to speak up, because we are all in the same boat. We are suffering from the same enemy, global enemy and local enemy together. So we need to speak up. We shouldn't be silent. And we shouldn't speak about Egypt alone, or female genital mutilation alone in Egypt. No. We have to know put everything in the global political context to understand the situation.
Of course, a lot of people would dispute the fact that Hillary Clinton...
That's good, the coffee, yes, good.
That's the coffee. So let's not dwell on that. But I saw an interview with you on Egyptian television where they asked you, what are you afraid of, Dr. Nawal? What are you afraid of? And you said, I'm not afraid of anything. And the interviewer asked, but aren't you afraid of God?
Afraid of God?
Yeah, this is what he said. Aren't you afraid of God?
If God is fair, he will be happy with me. If God is fair, he will be happy with me. Because number one, he should give me the freedom to criticize him. Isn't that democracy? If God is not democratic, if God is not democratic, nobody will be democratic, because he is our ideal. So if he does not allow criticism, then we can never have democracy. And in fact, there is no democracy anywhere, because it's very, very few people who criticize God and link this criticism of religion to politics. Because I see people who are very, very brave in criticizing God. Because God is invisible and he cannot punish them. But they are very afraid to criticize the president, or the power governing the country, because they may go to jail. But God will not put them in jail. But I was criticizing Sadat, Nasser, Mubarak, God, and I don't know what, Muslim brothers, Christian brothers, Jewish brothers. We need to use our mind. Like when I criticize this story, I don't think that many people were happy with my criticism.
But you haven't read it, honestly.
No, the idea. No, the idea of heroism. I'm not criticizing the story itself, but the idea of heroism. Because everybody speaks about heroism. I am not a hero. I'm sorry. I don't like to be a hero. I want to be a human being who is trying to be fair to myself and to others. And this is not heroism. This is nature. We should be natural. But when you think that people who are natural and who are using their own mind and criticizing God or the president or this story or anything, and you think they are heroes, no. Other people will be discouraged. That's why I don't like the word, they say mediocre. They say, here we have writers, great writers, and there are mediocre people. I hate this division. I hate division between people. So we need to work so that the division between people diminishes and we eradicate division between people. And we should fight, even if people become angry with us. I create a lot of anger because of what I'm saying. A lot of anger, because this story is universal. Universal. And some people believe it like God. Everything becomes universal and divine. So you cannot criticize anything. So I think the only way we can really change our world to be more equal, more fair, is just to speak our mind. Even if people will not applaud to us, we speak our mind.
Now, one thing that many young revolutionaries in Egypt today do not applaud when it comes to what you are saying about the current president is that, you are in support of Sisi as a president. You are not criticizing him the way you criticized Mubarak and Sadat, who put you in prison. Despite the fact that most people say that Egypt has never been worse than today when it comes to freedom of expression, when it comes to closing down media, newspapers, websites, putting activists in prison. A very famous blogger, Wael Abbas, who has been in Sweden many times, has been in prison since May, as have lots of young activists in Egypt. How come you are not criticizing the president today? I'm sure it's not because you're afraid.
What you said is very strange. Wherever I go in the United States after our revolution and after the army dismissed the Muslim brothers, everywhere I go they say Egypt became a big prison. There is no word. Egypt in a very bad situation. Sisi is putting people in prison. No freedom of speech. This is a big lie. I live in Egypt.
So do I.
And that's a lot of the whole global media is full of lies. Global media and local media is full of lies. And they propagate lies. Look about the lies about the Soviet Union. They elaborate the American policy. Nobody is criticizing Trump. Nobody. I expected you.
What do you mean nobody is criticizing? The whole world is criticizing
there
Trump.
There must be some common sense. Creativity to me is common sense. How can Egypt is now worse than Mubarak and Sadat? Under Sadat, I was in prison. And people like me were in prison. Thousands of people under Sadat were in prison. When I was under Mubarak, I was in exile. I lived 20 years in exile outside Egypt. And then we had the revolution. And because of the revolution, I am still living in Egypt. If the Muslim brothers won and took power, I could have been killed. But the army stood up against the Muslim brothers because Egypt could have been like Libya, like Syria, like Iraq, like Sudan. And this is the policy of the colonial powers. Europe, American colonial powers, to divide Egypt, to divide Libya, to divide Sudan, to divide Syria. That's how they can exploit us and control us, divide and rule. But the army in Egypt stood against the division by religion. So we have to be fair. But the global media is unfair. The American global policy is very unfair, but everybody believes them. You do not believe the Egyptian media, or you don't believe me. I am Egyptian, I'm from Egypt, but you believe Americans. We are all following the American media and the big lies. There are big lies about Egypt in the global media because they want to get rid of Sisi. Not Sisi, they want to get rid of the army. They want Egypt to be divided by religion. So we have to be careful. And very few people who are saying that, because many writers, intellectuals, who come to Europe, and they are exposed to these questions, they don't say what I'm saying, except very few. Because the power is great. Since I came here in Gothenburg, I had a press conference yesterday, and many of the journalists and the media speaking about one thing, Sisi. Sisi is a dictator. Sisi, a military man. Egypt is backward. My God, as if this is the problem of the world. Why? Why? We have to be careful.
But it's the problem of many Egyptians who are in prison,
How many?
Are not...
How many? Nobody knows.
Tens of thousands.
No, this is exaggeration. How many? The media, global media, exaggerate the number of prisoners. They exaggerate in order to criticize. I am not a Sisi woman or a military woman. I am not related to any government or any president or anybody. I'm not. I'm free. I'm a very free writer. And I write. Sometimes I criticize the government very hard in Egypt up till today. And nobody can touch me. Nobody can touch me and put me in prison. But if I was under Sadat or under Mubarak, I could have been in prison. So you see the difference.
With you, yes, but
Yeah,
there are a lot of other people who are in prison only for calling Sisi a date, for example, Balaha. He was put in prison, he's a poet, he wrote, he made fun of Sisi. You don't do that today. There's no satire in Egypt. There is no Yusri Fouda in Egypt doing television programs. There's no Bassem Youssef. Don't you agree?
There is exaggeration if one person is in prison now, if one person is in prison now, it is a lot of exaggeration about this individual. Of course, I am very much against putting anybody in prison. Anybody. Even people who are criticizing God or the president. People are free to say what they want. I am against. There should be no prisons in the world. But there are prisons everywhere. There are prisons in Sweden. There are prisons in the US. I've seen the prisons in US. I was about to go to prison in US when I was there. So there are prisons everywhere. So we have to fight against prisons all over the world, not only in Egypt. Not only in Egypt, but the exaggerating, to exaggerate the mistakes of Sisi or the problems of some prisoners in Egypt, and to generalize as if Egypt is all in prisons, this is not fair. And we have to be careful. And we have to push the people who are fighting against religious fundamentalism, against religious governments. We should not have any religious government or any religious state in Egypt or in Israel. In Israel, you have the Jewish state. Why? Why you have a Jewish state in Israel? Why you have a Muslim state in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt? Why you have a Christian state in Sweden? I am against religious state because there will be division of people by religion. Whenever you have religion, you have division.
One of the things about Egypt and Sisi's government that a lot of people in Europe know about is the labor unions and their weak situation. There's a global rights index that says that Egypt is one of the worst 10 countries in the world for laborers, for workers. And there was a young Italian student, PhD student, who was studying the independent labor unions in Egypt, and he was tortured to death, most people think, by the Egyptian intelligence.
Well, as if the labor union, as if there was a labor union in Egypt. We never had an independent labor union.
But there are small independent labor unions today.
No, we don't. We didn't have. I was a medical doctor in the medical union or medical syndicate. And I used to go to run the elections in the medical union. And the government stood against me. And they made me fail. And all the unions were dominated by the government. The labor union in Egypt was dominated by Sadat and Mubarak. We didn't have any independence of any union in Egypt. So to speak about, we didn't have any democracy in Egypt. There is no democracy anywhere in the world. There is no democracy here in Sweden or in the US. Because what is democracy? But as if Egypt was democratic and having independent labor union, and now they are in prison or they don't have the freedom. This is not true. Not true. So we have to be careful. I live in Egypt and I read the New York Times and I'm astonished what they are writing about us. It's very strange. How can you fight against all these powerful global lies? My voice cannot make anything. My voice is just few voices who live in Egypt and can say that. But it's everywhere, the rumors everywhere about prison in Egypt. The labor union is oppressed, and even women. They say women oppression is increasing, etc., etc. How can you fight all that? How can you fight all these global lies? I don't know. But I am frustrated. When I travel, I was in London in May, and the media, BBC, asked me the same questions. And I replied the same replies as I'm saying now in the BBC.
Well, I'm sorry, in your view, I'm part of this big conspiracy and big lies, because I also live in Egypt and I see I see a different picture. But Dr. Nawal, let's go back to your novels, because they are so fantastic, fabulous writing, books that you have published, around 50 books that you have published through your life. 70 books.
Since I was 13 years of age till now.
And one of the first, I think, that was translated into Swedish, it's called I think it's called God Dies by the Nile in English, and has a different title in Swedish, which I don't remember right now. But it's about a village, about the woman Zacchaeus, who in the end kills the mayor after he has raped her niece and made another niece his mistress. And there is the atmosphere in this small village where uncles rape their nieces, where there is injustice all over against women and poor people. Has this changed during your lifetime?
How it changed? Very, very little. I go to my village and I become sad. No, first of all, no agriculture production. You know what happened to Egypt? Like many of the colonies, we are a colony, we are an American colony. We cannot develop our agriculture. When I go to my village now, there is no green fields. When I was a child, I used to play in a vast green field. Now they disappeared. The peasants immigrated from the village to the city or outside the country. And we import our food from America. Even full medammes, you know, you live in Egypt. Full medammes is the national food of the poor. And we grow it in our villages. Now it's stopped. And we import full medammes from California. Can you imagine? With very high prices. That's neocolonialism. That we cannot develop our food. So when I go to my village, I don't see villagers. My grandmother disappeared. There is no village people. They all left the country, or now they are becoming small business people, doing some business work. They are agents in some American companies. So you don't know what they are doing. But it's very rare when you find a real peasant person sticking and working in the field, because the governments, since that, never encouraged the village people to produce, because Egypt's economy started to depend on importing food and full medammes and essential things from outside.
Fool and wheat are imported today from the United States.
Yes.
Wheat for the important Egyptian bread. I'm
even,
afraid
even
that
even the Nile shrinks. The Nile shrinks. Yeah.
The water of the Nile.
Yes.
Dr. Nawal, I'm afraid that our time is up, but we have about 30 seconds, and this book is a present for you.
Okay, thank you.
And I still maintain that, to me, when I met you the first time in 1982 as a student, you were Pippi Långstrump for me. And I think that you in many ways still are fighting the powerful on the side of the poor people and on women's side. Thank you very much for coming here. I think that you will be signing books as well. They have had to print new editions of your books because they're sold out in Sweden.
Really?
So somewhere around here you will be signing books, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
كتر خيرك. ألف شكرا.